We are back again with Eric Nierstedt, whose book, hold on, brain is working, Shadow Pantheon, because I can do titles, came out, gosh, when was that now?
I think a couple months ago now.
Has it been that long? Wow. Time. Okay. So, I guess you can talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into whatever's next.
All right. Sounds pretty good. All right. Well, Shadow Pantheon is the sequel to my last book, Silent Pantheon, and in this one, I have the gods and characters I set up from the last book. Find out that because of everything that happened in the first book, that they actually have a chance to find their fallen brethren across America. So they have to take this little road trip to different parts of the country and try to find people. But at the same time, there's another group of gods who are trying to find their kind, and they're not quite as benevolent towards humanity.
Curses, don't you hate it when those not so benevolent types show up and cause trouble?
Yeah, they always come. They always come.
It's one of those universal laws, probably.
Very true.
Yeah. Gosh, I would ask more questions, but I've already read the book, so I know what's going on, and it's how do I ask questions about a book that I've already read when I know all the spoilers already? Okay.
I'm sure you can find a way.
I'll work on it. All right. Nope, my brain has fritzed. I was going to ask a question about, where you're going with the different pantheons and what you're going to do with bringing new things in, but that goes more into the continuation of the series as opposed to just the Shadow Pantheon. Again, I guess I'll focus on your research.
All right. Well, when I started doing it, I always feel like a really good sequel, be it in a book or a film or anything like that, keeps everything that the first one did, but it expands on it in some way and makes things bigger and deeper and gives you more of an experience.
Right.
And I knew that since I had done the first book about gods reemerging in the modern times, I had to try to do that again, but do it in a way that was bigger and was more interesting. And for the gods I created, I thought it would be really interesting to think, well, what if they had to what if they found out that, members of their family are alive again, and they have to go find them and kind of wake them up. So I thought, that was a great quest because it has emotional significance. It makes their world a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew, just like in the first book, there had to be some kind of threat, and I didn't want to go with the same kind of antagonists I did in that book because I didn't want to repeat things.
Right.
So I also thought, well, I'm bringing in these new gods. What if I bring in other gods that maybe weren't as popular as these people and weren't as good for humanity, and see what they would do in the modern world?
I mean, to be fair, I feel like the modern world would be problematic for most pantheons of the past.
True.
Other gods and deities might not do quite as well with the whole technology thing, probably.
Well, luckily, I never got to a point where I had to show them how to use an iPhone, but that might be something to consider for the future.
I could see that going so badly.
Like, I curse you to the lowest depths of the underworld. Like, we can't just hit the power button; it'll turn on then.
Oh, I would like to see a whole series where creatures just sort of try to figure out all of this technology thing.
That could be a fun book.
That would be very entertaining.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Will there be more?
There will definitely be more. I do have actually a third book that I've finished the writing of, and I'm putting it through the editing process.
Okay.
And say that again?
No, just wow, that was faster than I expected.
Well, I mean, it's kind of I'm kind of one of those people where I can never just write one book, and I always like to play around with like where does it go next, or what happens if I do this, or put these people here. And with this, there's a lot of potential because you get to explore so many different mythologies, and kind of just wonder what would happen if this happened or these people got involved. And what I really enjoyed with the new book, small spoiler, was I got really inspired by it after I took a trip down to New Orleans,
Ah,
and and I started thinking about that culture down there, and primarily voodoo, and I started thinking about like that could be a really fun thing to explore and play with,
yeah.
and so
Oh,
that's part of the focus of the new one, and
oh, that's gonna be great.
all right, I hope so. And I'm also working on a collection of short stories, sort of like myths about each of these gods that were never written down, that they sort of kept hidden.
Oh,
And it's kind of fun in that way because I get to write about them in their own times as opposed to having to transpose everything into the modern era.
right. But then, ooh, ooh, I can imagine so many fun things to do with that because in the original myths that are often not talking about today, so many things are very entertaining. I mean,
Oh,
especially with the Norse and the Egyptian, I think their myths are just hilarious.
they have no, the Norse myths always do have some good ones, and it's funny they can be very dark at times, but
Yeah,
so often there's just a good fun story in there you can enjoy.
yeah,
And Egypt is actually really fun because getting when you're writing about Anubis, and I think I may have said this in the last interview, there are really no stories about him that were written down and told the way they were told by the other characters. So in a way, writing about him is like building up his own mythology,
yeah.
and
Which is pretty
that
fun.
was one thing I really enjoyed doing with this book because um, for his part in Shadow Pantheon, I had to talk about part of his backstory. So it was really good to be able to sort of create this whole, what did Anubis do in Egypt story because there really isn't any idea of what he did or what he was like. So it's fun to be able to create that now.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I did a good job with it.
I think it made perfect sense given what I know about all of those things. So,
Well,
hooray. Of course, I can't actually say anymore because spoilers. All right,
yeah,
so short
that does make
story.
it a problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well. But for these short stories, are you going to include stories about the gods that you introduced in book two or just our main cast of characters?
Well, definitely the main cast. I mean, I have to speak about them. And there are a couple of the gods that were in this story that I felt like kind of became part of the main cast afterwards. So
Yeah,
they get their own story as well.
yeah,
It's fun in some aspects because since I'm also writing about a couple of the newer characters from this story, they are sort of similar to Anubis in that there aren't really a lot of stories written about them, or they're written in a more specific kind of way that's where they're sort of that affects how they're presented. And I kind of wanted to go in, well, this is how I'm interpreting them, so let's maybe talk about them in a different way and see, maybe they're not just the character we see in the myths all the time.
right. Gosh, well, that's completely different than transposing, the gods onto a modern time because you have to actually like create a myth that sounds like it should belong to the whole mythology. Ooh,
Absolutely.
ooh, fun.
It's definitely a challenge. Like in some cases, I took sort of ideas that were established in the mythology and tried to come at them from a different approach.
Right.
For example, in Kali's story, my plan is her whole backstory is that she was created to fight this demon, and she was this ball of fury and anger. And I thought it was always interesting to think, well, what did they do after she killed the demon? and they really didn't, and they just had this angry warrior goddess, and they weren't quite sure what to do with her. So I thought that would be kind of fun to explore. Just how did the other gods understand Kali after she kind of accomplished her goal?
Yeah. Maybe, like relax and just try to breathe a bit, maybe. Don't kill us all.
Exactly. So really kind of exploring that and some of the formations she had of relationships she had with the other gods. So that part I haven't written it yet, but that's where I'm planning to go with it, and I think I'm going to have a lot of fun going there.
Oh, yeah, that'll be great. Oh, I like that. Fun. All right, so book 3 has been written. It's a way to be edited, which is always a fun process. And then you have short stories that you're working on. Okay, cool. So are you going to words? Ha. Are you just going to stay in this universe with these characters, or do you have other worlds to explore?
Right now, I feel like this is where my passion is. Like I'm seeing a lot more inspiration when I get into this world.
Yeah.
That's not to say don't want to do something else at some point, but for now, I'm very much enjoying this, and I do have further plans for these characters and where they're going. And the good thing about these kind of stories is they are sort of open-ended. You can continually write them, as long as you have an idea that works.
Right. Which I think yours does, especially the end of book 2. May I say that was highly entertaining.
Yeah, I was just thinking like she's gonna hate me for this ending again. I know she's gonna hate me for this ending.
It's great fun though. Oh yeah. All right, so here's a question I get to ask since the world is crazy. How has your writing process changed since all of this pandemic goo?
Well, I've been fairly fortunate. My day job is working in a pharmacy, so it was considered essential, and in that sense, my job never really stopped or changed. It got busier, but it was never a point where I didn't have work. So for me, things didn't really change too much.
Okay.
I will say writing did kind of become more important because, and I think most writers would probably agree right now, you need that kind of escape from all of this insanity right now. Yes, exactly. And, getting to dive into this world where you get to have, gods fighting each other and all of this other craziness, it's just it's so much of almost like meditation. You just need to get into this place where you don't have to think about what's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have found that to be very true, especially with some of the stories that I read that end well as opposed to end either on a cliffhanger or things are moving towards doom and gloom sort of thing. And I can't tell if that's just the times that have changed that perception or if it's just a normal progression in the books that I'm reading.
It is hard. I think that current events do affect your perception, and sometimes it does kind of make things difficult, especially when, in my case, because I've been some of the things I wrote about, especially in the third book, tend to be a little dark. And going over, it's like, oh God, I forgot I wrote that part. This is kind of weird now.
Oh no.
Yeah, the editing. I don't have anyone getting sick, thankfully, but
well, I mean, yeah, I do feel badly for all those people out there who were planning to do something involving a plague or sickness or whatever, and it's just bad timing. Yeah. Oops.
Although then again, maybe it is. I've heard that The Stand is selling a ridiculous number of copies right now.
Why does that not surprise me?
It's funny. I've actually had people I've talked to who are like, "Oh, I've heard about The Stand. What is it?" I'm like, "You really want me to tell you right now?"
Not really. No, I think we'll. I mean, to be fair, I did put together an anthology with virus stuff, so I understand. But I also think things are not quite out of the crazy zone yet.
No, definitely not.
Not.
But as that's been the one kind of good thing about all of this, because in a weird way, it's kind of a good time for writers, because not only do we need the escape, but everybody needs the escape, and I may have, and while I do have some kind of dark things in my book, I tend to kind of believe that things will eventually work out and that things can work. And I wouldn't say it's anything I've officially thought about when I'm writing, but I tend to write in a way where I know, like, as bad as this is going to be, there will be some way out of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of fantasy books, perhaps not the grimdark books, because grimdark, but I think a lot of them tend to have, okay, things are going to get terrible. That's just status quo across the whole genre. Things get bad, but usually they get better too. And I think that's, or at least I've seen a rise in fantasy, and I think in reading, and I think that might be why. But then again, I'm not sure. I don't know how many people who are at home who didn't really read before are now reading, because unfortunately that's also a group of people.
That's true. I think more people are probably trying it because there's only so much Netflix you can watch.
I mean, they do keep putting out new stuff from what I hear, but I don't know what they have because I don't have a Netflix account.
I've been kind of fortunate. I actually started getting into Doctor Who, so it's like I've got enough content for at least 40 years.
Yeah, wow. Okay, well the Doctor Who stuff lasts forever, so you should be set for a while.
I would hope so. I mean, I can only imagine what's going to be like watching the stuff from the 60s, but
wow. Okay, it's been a while since I have watched television shows from the 60s.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I'm kind of thinking like the production value is going to go way down soon. I know this.
Well, I mean, the original Star Trek.
Mm.
That's basically the baseline.
No, very true. But as I've said, if you can get entertained by things like that, or you can get entertained by the old Batman, or books about morticians who are also ancient Egyptian gods, why not?
Exactly. So much fun. I mean, it's all great. But then I read a lot, and I really like the science fiction and fantasy worlds out there. So I might be a little biased.
Fair. No, I think I am too. So I am curious. I did want to ask though, since I know we can't get into too many details with it because of the spoiler elements, but I'm curious, were there any, in reading it, like, were there any of the sort of surprises I put in there into the new book good? Were there any that really kind of threw you, or were you just enjoying it overall? Because there were a few things in there I'm very curious to see people's responses to.
Okay, sure. Okay, tell me generally which sections you want, if you can, and I shall give you the best answer I can without spoilers.
Okay, I've got one. I know you were very, very eager for there to be more pages after the end of the first book. So when you finally got that answer, how did that work how did that come across?
That was highly entertaining. I found that whole section, the continuation, the onwards bit, it's just, ooh, yeah, fun. But then, of course, that whole area, in terms of the mythology, is one of my favorites. So.
Yeah, I think, one thing I've kind of found is that I tend to write, just chapters in a way that there's like some little thing that makes you want to go, oh God, what happens now? I always try to keep that end of chapter tension high, and I think it's probably the reason I have such a hard time writing just one book and then putting it down. If my impulse is to leave something to get you excited for the next one.
I do that too, and I feel badly about it, but I also don't.
As long as it keeps people interested and entertained, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
And
it worked well. And I think the end of this book also worked well for how it was laid out.
yeah, I think the ending was a lot of fun because it kind of straddles the line between people who might be very aware of what the mythology behind it, and people who are not, because it's one of those scenes where if you know the mythology, you know this is a big deal and this is something important. But if you don't at the same time, you still know that this is something huge, and hopefully it's interesting enough where you want to find out like what it means and where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this will be fun. Ooh, book 3 is going to be great. We've set up so many situations that can just you poke at it and things will go poof.
Indeed, and I guess now I have to ask the big twist that I put in towards the end.
Uh-huh.
I think you know the one. How did that go over? Because I felt like that was something where either people were going to be surprised, but wasn't entirely sure what their secondary reaction would be.
Okay. I think there are a couple of different things. So the bit with our main villainess, that one I saw because I'm familiar with the mythology, probably more than the average bear. But the bit with our main villain, that one was fun. Oh, I enjoyed that twist a lot.
No, with that I just thought I initially had like so many different ideas going around as to how to do it. I think I mentioned the afterword. I was considering, creating a new character, and I kind of thought, no, there's enough. That's just creating another character for the sake of another character. And I thought there's still some stuff I can do with these characters I've established that would be a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
And then when I thought about just how the mythology interacts with this new villain and some of the the characters that exist already, I was like, that would be so much fun to play with.
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, the only thing I could ever see going wrong with that is people who aren't familiar with the mythology and have also seen the movies.
Yes. I will. Yeah, I think Marvel has definitely given people a certain viewpoint on the stories, but ideally but I think they actually kind of went in this direction themselves at one point. So hopefully, people who have read the books and know it from that won't be too surprised.
Yeah.
But I'm just very curious to see what the public response is. You never know how the mass audience is going to take it, and I'm sure if I'm ever lucky enough to get asked about it at like some bigger event or a convention of some kind, I'll have a lot of very interesting thoughts that I'm going to hear.
Oh, I would like to see that. That would be very fun. All of the different reactions you can get from that are just amazingly entertaining. And I probably went through most of them. Anyways.
My dream would be if I could actually see someone get to that point in the story and then just watch all the emotions go across their face. I would love to see that.
Yeah, that would be great. So as far as conventions, do you have plans to do them when things calm down?
I would like to. I had previously done some authors event in the area. There was a couple of libraries that were having some really good events for indie authors. So if any authors are looking, like, check your libraries when things get back to normal, because they might have something for you.
Yeah.
As for the bigger ones, I really do want to try it because I have not really presented the Pantheon books at any conventions yet, and I'm very curious to see if I get to the right kind of event, what might work. I've done a lot of comic conventions and things like that, and it's a good audience for fantasy and science fiction. But this would be the first time really kind of taking it on the road. So I'd be very curious to see how that goes, and if people are really captivated by the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, planning the convention circuit right now is not perhaps the best time.
Well, when San Diego doesn't happen, like things are going to be weird for a while.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it'll be entertaining to see what happens next year because, I mean, presumably we're still going to have it next year. We're going to have all of the coronavirus, vaccine or no vaccine, whatever. It's still going to be here. But the question of whether or not things will stay shut down is an entirely different one.
Yeah, well, hopefully at that point, we'll have the right measures in place and people will be doing the things they're supposed to be doing, because I think that's really all. I think that's what it boils down to more than anything else.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, well, that's a depressing thought. Let's move on to something more cheerful.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, I had it. Curses. There we go. Will you ever set any of your books fully in one of the past times for any of our Pantheon? Will they say you were to set Balder in his own time?
Ooh,
Would that be a full book, or are you just going to continue with the short stories sort of a thing?
That's a good question. Well, right now I'm only seeing the short stories. That could be fun though, if they got to some point where they had to somehow travel back in time to Asgard or Olympus or any of those and sort of see what it was, and kind of not only for Balder to sort of revisit his past or for any of the characters, but also for all the others to see, like, this is how they did things? Like, I'm just imagining, Coyote in certain spots, and it's not going well for anyone. It's just not.
Oh, that I want to see. That would be highly entertaining.
I'm just imagining he's talking to Odin's wall. It's like, guys, come on, you can do better than this. Go out there, eat something. Come on.
Oh, I would love to see that. Okay, yes, that would be very entertaining. I feel like throwing Coyote into pretty much any circumstance involving any of the other, main pantheons, the Olympus, the Asgard, etc., would just be so funny.
No, it's definitely a good idea. It's kind of just figuring out a way to make it work, because at the moment, like, time travel is not something I really need to get into too much, but it would definitely be a fun thing to explore. And maybe ideally the short stories, if they can help me get a grip on how it works for this series, maybe I could go re-explore it.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, that's actually been one thing I found very interesting with the stories, because when I got to Balder's story, I had to sort of write about characters that had just been dead up to this point, like the Valkyries and Odin specifically, and that was hard because I wanted to kind of have this balance between sort of the way most people perceive Odin and sort of what he was really like.
Mm-hmm.
And he, most people think like, oh, he was this, wise and noble god who knew all these things and watched over. And they're like, he wasn't exactly like that. Like, if you've seen Mr. Wednesday, that's not too dissimilar from what he was like. So I really had to find a way to sort of strike a balance between those two perceptions. Mm. And hopefully I did a good job. I don't want to say too much until I get that out, but
right.
It was definitely a bit of a challenge to sort of see, like, how do you balance someone who kind of was, more of a schemer and more of a wily character than people realize, with this image of Anthony Hopkins talking to Thor about, like, you must not bring war to these realms, my son.
I mean, to be fair, Anthony Hopkins doing almost anything sounds refined and like slightly above the average intelligence level, which from the stories I've read, Odin was capable, but perhaps not quite at that level.
No, he definitely had the potential. I remember there's a professor I've watched online who talks in great deal about Norse myth, and one thing he said that always struck me was he talked about how that whole scene where where Odin is yelling at Thor about bringing the horrors of war, and that's where takes away his power and sends him to Earth. And they said, well, in the actuality, Odin would start that speech and then clap Thor in the back and say, "Good job, son, because now I'm going to have more men in Valhalla." So I kind of had to find like the middle ground there, where it's like he's not that crazy, but he's a little crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love playing with that sort of fun for characters.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be great. All right. So, what? Okay. So, short story, book 3. That's the plan for the rest of the year. Yes.
That's definitely the plan for a while. I mean, I certainly feel like I have to give Shadow Pantheon time to sort of build up and find its audience and get out there.
Yeah.
Probably the next one, when it comes out, would probably be much later in the year, or maybe in the next year. The short stories I'm still working on, so I'm about a story and a half into it.
Okay. So that'll take a little longer then.
Definitely, yeah. It kind of works in a way because I do have a couple of other bigger stories planned, but the short story one is sort of a way to not only kind of explore them more, but also sort of catch my breath a little and kind of figure out like how do I do those stories.
Yeah, it's good to sometimes do something a little smaller, a little different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will say I do want to do one thing towards the end of the year. I initially sort of considered this for the short story collection, but I'm thinking I might go in a different direction now. For some reason, I'd always wanted to do a Christmas story with these characters. And
that would be so fun.
Oh, I have some thoughts. I mean, I was just trying to figure out like how exactly I would do it. And well, one thing that kind of hit me was I was always a fan of Krampus.
I love Krampus. Oh,
So
especially with
like
the whole...
that could be entertaining. Just bring them into contact with Krampus and just see what happens. So I'd like to kind of get like just a small story out, maybe on Amazon as like a bonus or something around that time, because if nothing, it'll definitely be a fun story to write. And again, just another way to show like all these different mythologies, living together, which is always sort of a great idea to explore when it's done right.
Yeah. Ooh, especially there are many things to explore with the whole Germanic Norse tradition that moved through there and developed into Father Christmas, and also Krampus. So much fun. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think they've actually said Odin was a pretty big inspiration for the look of Santa Claus anyway.
Yeah. There was, oh gosh, it's been too many years since my first German teacher told me these stories, but it was something about Odin developed into some sort of benevolent thing at Christmas time and became Father Christmas. I'm not entirely sure how that was done. It was something to do with like the crossover between the church and mythologies and the Nordic traditions that were through the region, and that requires a bit more research. But it should be fun either way.
I hope so. I mean, it's like you said. I think you do. I think when you actually do start reading the stories, you kind of do see little things here and there that you sort of think like, well, that sounds vaguely like this thing in Christianity, or that sounds vaguely like this thing in Norse mythology, and it's fun to kind of see how it all evolved from each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the reason I started going in this direction, because it was sort of like, well, this was I've always thought, well, this was dominant for a while, then it sort of changed and became this thing, and initially it was sort of what happens to the people, to the gods that are left behind, but it does make you think about how much it's all really connected.
Mm-hmm. And it's just fun to play with Krampus.
Oh, always.
All right. Well, I will look out for that one. Yeah. Ooh.
Well, I'm hoping I can. I'll have at least far enough into the short story thing where I can take a little bit of a break and just write that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be a lot. It should be a lot of fun if I can do it right.
Yeah. Well, if not this year, then next year.
Very true.
All right. Well, have a fantastic day. I shall definitely be on the lookout for more news and events coming up.
Okay. Likewise.
All right. Well, have a fantastic day. Enjoy the rest of your week, and don't cause too much trouble.
I'll do my best, but I make no promises.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.